Rain battered the city of Lagos like an angry storm refusing to rest. Thunder rumbled across the dark sky while expensive cars crawled through flooded roads, their headlights reflecting against pools of muddy water. Street hawkers hurried under broken umbrellas. Kiki riders cursed loudly at impatient drivers. Somewhere in the distance, loud Afrobeats music escaped from a nightclub despite the terrible weather. Inside the top floor of the magnificent Okafor Group headquarters in Victoria Island, Obinna Okafor stood before the giant glass windows of his office, staring silently at the storm. His reflection stared back at him. Tall, handsome, powerful. At just 32 years old, Obinna had become one of the youngest billionaires in Nigeria. His company controlled oil contracts, real estate investments, shipping businesses, and tech startups across Africa. Newspapers called him the Golden Prince of Lagos. People admired him everywhere he went. Men envied him. Women desired him. Businessmen feared him. But none of them knew the truth. Obinna was exhausted, completely exhausted. The luxurious office around him suddenly felt like a prison. Behind him, voices continued arguing loudly during the board meeting. We cannot delay the Port Harcourt deal any longer. The shareholders are already nervous. We need another investor. Obinna closed his eyes briefly. Every day felt exactly the same. Meetings, pressure, competition, pretending, always pretending. Pretending he enjoyed the endless parties. Pretending he trusted the people around him. Pretending his relationship with Vanessa Cole was perfect. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Sir. His assistant carefully stepped into the office. The board members are waiting. Obinna adjusted his expensive wristwatch and forced a smile. Tell them I'm coming. The assistant nodded quickly and left. The moment the door closed, the fake smile disappeared instantly. He loosened his tie slowly. Sometimes he wondered when exactly his life stopped feeling real. Maybe it happened after the money came. Or maybe after people stopped seeing him as human. These days everyone wanted something from him. Contracts, connections, money, status. Even friendship now felt like a business transaction. Another flash of lightning brightened the office. Obinna exhaled deeply before returning to the conference room. The moment he entered, every voice fell silent. That was the effect he had on people. Fear, respect, obedience. The massive conference table was surrounded by wealthy executives in expensive suits. One of the directors immediately stood. Mr. Okafor, we were discussing the Calabar expansion project. I know what you were discussing. Obinna interrupted calmly as he sat down. Silence followed. Nobody dared challenge him directly. For the next 2 hours, they discussed investments, partnerships, and profit projections. Numbers filled giant screens. Contracts moved from one hand to another. But Obinna's attention drifted repeatedly. At one point, he noticed 2 executives whispering while glancing toward him. The moment they realized he saw them, they quickly looked away. Obinna almost laughed bitterly. Nobody was genuine anymore. Not in his world. Finally, the meeting ended close to 10 p.m. The executives hurried out respectfully while thanking him repeatedly. Excellent presentation, sir. Brilliant strategy as always. We're lucky to have your leadership. The compliments sounded empty. As the room cleared, only his closest friend remained behind. Tundbako leaned casually against the table while sipping expensive whiskey. You look stressed, Tund said. I am stressed. You need rest. Obinna gave a tired chuckle. Rest doesn't exist for people like us. Tund smirked. That's why you should enjoy your money more. Fly to Dubai. Buy another yacht. Marry Vanessa quickly and disappear for honeymoon. At the mention of Vanessa, Obinna's expression changed slightly. Tund noticed immediately. What? Obinna hesitated. Then quietly, do you ever wonder if people genuinely love us? Tund laughed loudly. Rich men don't ask those kinds of questions. I'm serious. Tund shrugged. As long as they stay loyal, does it matter? Obinna looked away toward the storm outside. Yes, he said quietly. I think it does. Tun studied him briefly before speaking carefully. You're overthinking things. Maybe he was. But recently, little things had started bothering him. Vanessa's obsession with social media appearances. The way she constantly compared him to other billionaires. How every conversation somehow returned to money, luxury, or status. Sometimes he caught her staring at wealthy men during events. Sometimes he wondered if she loved him, or simply loved the life attached to him. Anyway, Tun said while standing up, your fiancé called earlier. Obina frowned. She did. She sounded angry. That's normal. Tun laughed again. You really should go home before she starts another fight. Obina grabbed his car keys slowly. Yeah, he muttered. Maybe I should. Outside, the rain had become worse. The parking lot glistened under flashing security lights while thunder shook the night sky. Obina entered the back seat of his black Rolls-Royce Phantom, while his driver hurried inside after him. Good evening, sir. Evening. The driver started the engine carefully. As they pulled out of the company building, Lagos nightlife surrounded them immediately. Bright lights, traffic horns, street vendors, luxury clubs. The city never truly slept. Obina leaned his head back against the leather seat and closed his eyes briefly. His phone buzzed. Vanessa. He sighed before answering. Hello. Her voice came sharp immediately. Finally, you picked up. I was in a meeting. You're always in meetings. Obina rubbed his forehead tiredly. Vanessa, you promised we would have dinner tonight. I know. You always know, Obina, but you never change. The driver quietly focused on the road while tension filled the car. I said I'm sorry. You think money fixes everything. Obina's jaw tightened slightly. I never said that. You missed my friend's engagement party yesterday too. I was working. You're married to your company. The argument continued for several minutes until finally Vanessa sighed angrily. Just come home. Then she hung up. Obina stared at the dark screen silently. No, I love you. No concern about his stress. Nothing. Only complaints. Outside, heavy rain blurred the city lights. Sir, the driver said carefully, should I slow down? The roads are dangerous tonight. Obina looked outside absent-mindedly. Water flooded parts of the highway already. Cars moved cautiously through the storm. But all he wanted was to get home and end the miserable day. No, he replied quietly. Keep going. Meanwhile, several streets ahead, chaos was unfolding. A drunk politician's son sped recklessly through the rain in a white sports car, while loud music blasted inside his vehicle. His friends laughed wildly. Faster! We're late! The driver grinned arrogantly and pressed harder on the accelerator. The tires slid dangerously across the wet road. But he didn't care. Back inside the Rolls-Royce, Obina stared out quietly as memories flooded his mind. He remembered growing up poor in Enugu. Remembered watching his mother cry over unpaid rent. Remembered promising himself he would become successful someday. And he did. He achieved everything. But why did happiness still feel so far away? His phone buzzed again. This time it was his mother. A soft smile finally touched his face. Mama, my son. Her warm voice answered immediately. Have you eaten? Obina chuckled softly. No. You work too hard. So everyone keeps saying, come visit me this weekend. I'll try. No, she corrected firmly. You will. He smiled properly now. Unlike everyone else in his life, his mother never cared about his money. To her, he was still simply her son. I miss you, she said softly. Obina looked out at the storm. I miss you too, Mama. Suddenly, bright headlights appeared directly ahead. Too close. Too fast. The driver's eyes widened in horror. Sir! A white sports car had lost control while speeding through the flooded road. Everything happened instantly. The sports car spun violently across lanes straight toward them. Jesus Christ! Tires screeched. The Rolls-Royce swerved sharply. Obina grabbed the seat instinctively. Another car blasted its horn loudly. Metal slammed against metal with terrifying force. Glass exploded everywhere. The world flipped violently. Pain shot through Obina's body like fire. His mother screamed his name through the phone. Then darkness swallowed everything. Far away, inside a luxurious Lekki mansion, Vanessa sat scrolling through Instagram while waiting impatiently. Candles decorated the dining table beautifully. Expensive food had already gone cold. She checked the time angrily. Unbelievable. Just then, her phone rang. She frowned, seeing an unknown number. "Hello. Good evening, ma'am," a nervous voice said. "This is from St. Catherine Hospital." Her expression slowly changed. What happened? Hours later, hospital corridors buzzed with tension. Doctors rushed around frantically. Security guards controlled journalists gathering outside. News had already spread online. Billionaire CEO involved in terrible accident. Inside the emergency ward, machines beeped steadily, while Obina lay unconscious beneath bright lights. His body was covered in injuries. Bandages wrapped around his chest and head. Doctors spoke urgently nearby. Internal bleeding stabilized. What about spinal response? We still don't know. Prepare for another scan. Outside the ward, Vanessa arrived in tears alongside Obina's mother. "Mama, he'll survive," Vanessa whispered shakily. But Obina's mother remained silent, clutching her Bible tightly. Hours passed painfully. Finally, near dawn, the doctor emerged. He survived. Relief flooded everyone instantly. But the doctor's expression remained troubled. "There's something else." Vanessa's heart pounded. "What?" The doctor exhaled slowly. "The spinal injuries are serious." Silence. "We cannot yet determine the full extent of the damage." Obina's mother covered her mouth emotionally. Vanessa looked frozen. "What does that mean exactly?" The doctor hesitated carefully. "It may affect his ability to walk." The words landed like thunder. And somewhere inside the intensive care unit, unconscious beneath the machines and pain, the life of Obina Okafor was about to change forever. The first thing Obina Okafor felt when he regained consciousness was pain. Not ordinary pain. Not the kind caused by stress or exhaustion. This was sharp, heavy, unforgiving. It crawled through his entire body like fire burning slowly beneath his skin. His eyelids twitched weakly as the bright hospital lights stabbed into his vision. The smell of antiseptic filled the air while machines beeped steadily around him. For several seconds, he could not remember where he was. Then the memories crashed back violently. Rain, headlights, screaming tires, the collision. Obina groaned softly. Immediately, someone stood up beside him. "Obina!" His mother's trembling voice filled the room. Mrs. Okafor rushed toward him with tears running down her cheeks while nurses quickly adjusted the machines nearby. "My son! Thank God!" Obina blinked slowly, struggling to focus on her face. "Mama! You scared me." His throat felt painfully dry. "What happened?" "You were in an accident." Fragments returned instantly. The Rolls-Royce, the spinning car, the impact. Fear suddenly gripped his chest. "My driver. He survived." His mother replied quickly. "He has injuries, but he's alive." Obina relaxed slightly. Then he noticed something strange. His body felt wrong, heavy, numb. He tried to move his legs beneath the blanket. Nothing happened. A cold chill ran through him. He tried again. Still nothing. Panic exploded inside his chest immediately. "My legs." His mother's expression changed. Obina's heartbeat accelerated violently. "Mama!" Before she could answer, the doctor entered the room alongside two nurses. Dr. Adebayo Hassan was a calm-looking man in his late 50s with tired eyes and gray hair. "Good morning, Mr. Okafor," he said carefully. Obina ignored the greeting completely. "My legs." The doctor exchanged a brief glance with the nurses before stepping closer. "You suffered serious spinal trauma during the accident." Obina swallowed hard. "I can't feel them. We are still conducting tests." "That's not what I asked." Silence filled the room. The doctor sighed quietly. "There is swelling around your spine." Obina stared at him intensely. "Will I walk again?" Another silence. That silence terrified him more than words ever could. "We honestly don't know yet," the doctor admitted carefully. Obinna felt the air leave his lungs. No, no, this couldn't be happening. Not to him. Not now. He was supposed to get married in 3 months. He had billionaire projects waiting. International meetings. Expansion plans. Dreams. His entire life depended on movement. Control. Power. And suddenly he could not even move his legs. "No," he whispered weakly. His mother grabbed his hand tightly while tears streamed down her face again. "You will recover," she said desperately. "God is in control." But even she sounded unconvinced. The next few days passed like a nightmare. The hospital became flooded with visitors. Politicians, business partners, celebrities, family members. Bouquets of flowers filled the room so heavily that nurses had to move some outside. Social media exploded with concern. Prayers for billionaire CEO Obinna Okafor. Lagos business icon hospitalized after terrible accident. Television stations discussed his condition non-stop. People who had not spoken to him in years suddenly acted concerned. Some came genuinely worried. Others came because being associated with Obinna Okafor still carried importance. Even while lying helpless in bed, he could still see the difference. One afternoon, 2 senators arrived with television cameras following closely behind them. "Obinna, Nigeria is praying for you," one politician announced dramatically. Minutes later, they left immediately after taking photos. Another businessman entered smiling loudly. "My brother. You'll be fine." Yet while speaking, he secretly asked Obinna's assistant about company shares and board meetings. It disgusted him. The accident had barely happened, yet vultures were already circling. Still, among all the visitors, one person mattered most to him. Vanessa Cole. First, she appeared heartbroken. She cried beside his bed, held his hand, kissed his forehead gently. But slowly, very slowly, Obinna began noticing things. Tiny things. Strange things. The first moment happened on the 4th day. Vanessa sat scrolling through her phone while a doctor adjusted Obinna's medication nearby. "Your rehabilitation may take several months," the doctor explained. Vanessa immediately looked up. "Several months?" "Yes." Her expression changed instantly before she quickly forced another smile. "Oh, okay." But Obinna noticed it. Disappointment. Not concern. Disappointment. Another moment came during a family discussion about physiotherapy. "What if he needs treatment abroad?" his mother asked worriedly. Vanessa looked uneasy immediately. "How long would that take?" "Maybe a year," the doctor answered honestly. Vanessa went quiet for the rest of the conversation. Obinna noticed everything now. The forced smiles. The impatience. The subtle frustration. At first, he convinced himself he was imagining it. But then came the conversation that changed everything. It happened late one evening. The rain outside tapped softly against the hospital windows while most visitors had already gone home. Obinna pretended to sleep as 2 familiar voices approached outside his private ward. He recognized them instantly. Tund Bako and another friend, Femi Lawson. "You think he'll recover?" Femi asked quietly. Tund sighed. "I don't know. God." Imagine becoming crippled overnight. Obinna's chest tightened painfully. "He built everything around power," Femi continued. "This could destroy him mentally." Tund lowered his voice further. "The board members are already nervous." "What about Vanessa?" A small laugh followed. "She's probably panicking." "You think she'll stay?" Silence. Then Tund spoke carefully. "If Obinna can't walk again, things will change." Femi chuckled bitterly. Women love successful men. Obinna felt something crack quietly inside him. The voices continued. "To be honest," Femi muttered, "I don't even know how to face him anymore." "Why? What do you say to a billionaire who suddenly becomes helpless?" Their footsteps slowly faded away. Inside the room, Obinna stared silently at the ceiling. His chest felt unbearably heavy. For the first time in years, he felt truly alone. Not because people weren't around him, but because he suddenly realized how conditional most relationships were. Everything in his life had always been connected to power. People respected his money, admired his success, feared his influence. But remove those things, and what remained? That question haunted him deeply. 3 days later, Obinna requested a private meeting with Dr. Hassan. The doctor entered carefully while closing the door behind him. "You asked for me?" Obinna nodded slowly. "I need complete honesty." "You already have it." "No," Obinna said quietly. "I need to know something else." The doctor folded his arms patiently. "What exactly?" Obinna stared out the hospital window for several seconds before finally speaking. "How many people remain after power disappears?" The doctor frowned slightly. "I'm not sure I understand." Obinna turned toward him. "All my life, people have treated me differently because I'm rich." The doctor remained silent. "They laugh at my jokes even when they aren't funny. They agree with me even when I'm wrong. They stay because I'm useful." Dr. Hassan studied him carefully. "This accident changed how you see people." "Yes." The room became quiet briefly. Then Obinna spoke again. "I want to know who truly loves me." The doctor's expression hardened slightly. "What are you planning?" Obinna inhaled deeply. "The next time Vanessa visits." He paused. "Tell her I may never walk again." The doctor blinked slowly. "What?" "You heard me. Mr. Okafor. I need to know the truth." The doctor stepped closer. "This is dangerous emotionally. So is living surrounded by fake people. You're making decisions from fear." "No," Obinna replied calmly. "From observation." Dr. Hassan sighed heavily. "She already knows your injuries are serious. That's not enough. You want me to lie to her? I want you to help me reveal the truth." The doctor removed his glasses slowly. "I became a doctor to heal people, not manipulate emotions." Obinna's voice softened slightly. "Please." The desperation in his eyes surprised the doctor. For a moment, Obinna no longer looked like a billionaire. He simply looked like a wounded man terrified of losing everything. "I need to know if she loves me," he whispered quietly. Dr. Hassan hesitated for a long time. Finally, he sighed. "This is a terrible idea. But you'll help me?" The doctor looked deeply conflicted. Then eventually, "One conversation." Obinna nodded slowly. "One conversation is enough." The following afternoon, Vanessa arrived at the hospital looking elegant as always. Her designer handbag swung gently beside her while expensive perfume filled the room almost instantly. But despite her beauty, Obinna noticed exhaustion on her face now. Not emotional exhaustion. Frustration. She kissed his forehead lightly. "How are you feeling today?" "I've been better." She forced a soft laugh. "Well, at least you're alive." Obinna studied her quietly. Once upon a time, that statement would have sounded comforting. Now it felt empty. Vanessa sat beside him while checking her phone repeatedly. "My friends keep asking about you," she said casually. Obinna said nothing. "You know social media has been going crazy." Still silence. Finally she looked up properly. "What?" "Nothing. You're staring at me strangely." Before Obinna could respond, the door opened. Dr. Hassan entered with a serious expression. "Miss Vanessa," he said carefully, "can we speak for a moment?" Her face immediately changed. "Is something wrong?" The doctor hesitated deliberately. Then slowly, "We received the latest spinal results this morning." Vanessa looked between them nervously. "And?" The doctor inhaled quietly. "The damage is worse than we initially hoped." The room became silent instantly. Obinna lowered his eyes and pretended emotional devastation. Vanessa stared at the doctor. "What does that mean exactly?" Dr. Hassan spoke carefully. "There is a strong possibility Mr. Okafor may never walk again." Silence. Heavy. Cold. Terrifying silence. Vanessa froze completely. Her lips parted slightly. "What?" "The spinal nerves suffered extensive trauma." "No." "We will continue therapy," the doctor continued. "But medically speaking, permanent paralysis is possible." Vanessa slowly turned toward Obinna. And in that moment, he saw it clearly. Not heartbreak, not grief, fear, pure fear. Her breathing became uneven. "You mean," she whispered shakily, "he could remain like this forever?" The doctor nodded slowly. "Yes." Vanessa stood up immediately as if the chair suddenly burned her. "Oh my God!" She began pacing nervously. "No, no, no." Obinna watched silently. The reaction hurt more than he expected. Not because she was shocked, but because her shock felt selfish. "What about surgery abroad?" she asked quickly. "There are no guarantees. And rehabilitation? It may help partially." "Partially?" she repeated weakly. Dr. Hassan nodded carefully. "We are preparing for long-term management." Vanessa covered her mouth slowly. Obinna pretended emotional pain while secretly studying every expression crossing her face. And the deeper the conversation went, the more terrified she became. Not for him, for herself. Finally, after several minutes, she forced herself to sit again. "We'll get through this," she whispered mechanically. But her eyes no longer looked the same. Something inside them had changed. Something important. And Obinna saw it clearly. The doctor quietly excused himself and left the room. Silence remained behind. Vanessa stared blankly at the floor while gripping her handbag tightly. Then softly, almost to herself, she whispered, "This can't be happening." Obinna turned his face toward the window. Because suddenly, for the first time since the accident, he realized his greatest fear might not be losing his legs. It might be losing the people he thought loved him. The day Obinna Okafor left the hospital, Lagos stood under a gray, cloudy sky. News reporters gathered outside the hospital gates from early morning, holding cameras and microphones anxiously while security guards struggled to control the crowd. "Has the billionaire been discharged yet? Can we get a picture? Is it true he may never walk again?" Social media had turned his condition into national gossip. Some people prayed sincerely for him. Others discussed him like entertainment. Inside the private hospital suite, Obinna sat quietly in a wheelchair beside the window while nurses packed his medications carefully into boxes. The room that once overflowed with visitors now felt strangely empty. Only his mother remained nearby, silently folding his clothes into a travel bag. Even Vanessa Cole had not arrived yet. Obinna stared outside thoughtfully. 2 months ago, the entire world seemed to revolve around him. Now everything felt different, quieter, colder, more distant. "Your physiotherapy schedule is inside this file," Dr. Adebayo Hassan explained while handing documents to Obinna's assistant. "You'll also need regular spinal evaluations." Obinna nodded absent-mindedly. The doctor hesitated before speaking again. "How are you feeling mentally?" Obinna gave a faint smile. "Should I answer honestly?" "Yes. I feel like I'm attending my own funeral." The doctor's face softened slightly. "That feeling is common after traumatic injuries." Obinna looked down at his motionless legs beneath the blanket. "No," he murmured quietly. "This feels different." And it truly did. Because it was not only his body recovering. His entire life was changing. People no longer looked at him the same way. Even the hospital staff had changed subtly. At first, nurses treated him with excitement because he was the famous billionaire Obinna Okafor. But over time, pity slowly replaced admiration. And Obinna hated pity, more than pain, more than weakness. He hated seeing sympathy in people's eyes. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Vanessa finally entered the room wearing oversized sunglasses despite being indoors. She kissed the air beside Obinna's cheek lightly before sitting down. "You're finally leaving this place," she said. Her voice carried forced excitement. But Obinna noticed something else underneath. Relief. Not because he was healing, but because hospital life embarrassed her. "You look tired," he said quietly. Vanessa sighed dramatically while removing her sunglasses. "I barely sleep anymore." Obinna studied her silently. Once upon a time, hearing that would have touched him deeply. Now he wondered whether her exhaustion came from caring for him, or mourning the luxurious future she believed was slipping away. "We should leave before the reporters become worse," she muttered while checking her phone. As if on cue, shouting erupted outside the hospital entrance. Cameras flashed wildly. The nurses carefully helped Obinna into the wheelchair, while security officers prepared to escort him outside. The moment the hospital doors opened, chaos exploded instantly. "Mr. Okafor, sir, can you speak to the press? Will you recover fully? Is it true you're paralyzed?" Camera flashes blinded him repeatedly. Vanessa walked slightly ahead, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. Security guards pushed reporters back while Obinna remained silent throughout the entire ordeal. He simply stared forward blankly. For the first time in years, he hated being seen. The black SUV finally pulled into the massive gates of Obinna's mansion in Banana Island. Normally, returning home brought peace. But today, the giant mansion looked unfamiliar. Cold, like a beautiful place emptied of warmth. Workers lined up respectfully at the entrance as the vehicle stopped. Some looked genuinely emotional seeing him in a wheelchair. Others looked uncomfortable. Obinna noticed every expression carefully. His house manager hurried forward nervously. "Welcome home, sir." The driver carefully helped lift the wheelchair down while several workers watched quietly. Vanessa immediately walked ahead toward the mansion entrance, already distracted by a phone call. "Yes, I know the wedding may need postponing." Her voice faded into the distance. Obinna noticed. Of course he noticed. The workers wheeled him inside slowly. The luxurious mansion remained breathtaking. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, massive staircases, expensive artwork. Everything looked exactly the same. Yet somehow, nothing felt the same anymore. As he entered the living room, silence filled the air awkwardly. No music played. No laughter echoed. The atmosphere felt tense. Even the staff did not know how to behave around him now. Some avoided eye contact completely. Others stared too long before quickly looking away. One maid accidentally dropped a tray from nervousness. Another worker whispered sympathetically, "Poor man." Obinna heard it. Every word. Every whisper. And each one cut deeper than expected. The first week home became unbearable. Physiotherapists visited daily. Doctors called constantly. Board members demanded updates about company decisions. Meanwhile, Obinna remained trapped between pain, frustration, and silence. At night, he often sat alone in darkness staring out across Lagos Island from the mansion balcony. The city lights glittered beautifully in the distance. Traffic still moved. Businesses still operated. Life continued normally. But his own life felt paused. One evening, his phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from business associates. "Hope you recover soon. Praying for your healing. Take all the time you need." Most messages felt fake, especially because many of the same people had stopped visiting entirely. His closest circle was shrinking rapidly. Tundbako visited less frequently now. Other friends disappeared completely. Excuses became common. Busy schedule. Traveling abroad. Family emergency. Obinna understood the truth. People did not know what to do with a broken billionaire. Meanwhile, Vanessa was changing too. At first, she tried to maintain appearances. She accompanied him to therapy sessions, smiled around visitors, held his hand publicly. But privately, cracks began appearing. One morning during breakfast, Obinna struggled to lift a cup properly because of lingering pain in his arm. Vanessa sighed impatiently. "Careful." The tone bothered him immediately. Not concern. Annoyance. Later that afternoon, a physiotherapist discussed installing ramps around the mansion. Vanessa frowned instantly. "Ramps?" "Yes," the therapist replied. "It will help mobility." Vanessa looked around the luxurious living room almost offensively. "But it'll ruin the aesthetics of the house." Obinna stared at her quietly. The therapist looked uncomfortable. "Well, functionality is important." Vanessa forced a smile. "Of course," but Obinna saw the irritation in her eyes. Another evening, She returned late from dinner with friends smelling strongly of perfume and alcohol. "You didn't answer my calls," Obina said calmly. "I needed space." "Space from what?" Vanessa threw her handbag onto the couch dramatically. "Everything." Silence followed. She immediately softened her voice afterward. "I'm sorry. I'm just stressed." But Obina noticed how frequently the word stress appeared now. Not we. Not us. Only her stress. Her burden. Her frustration. One rainy afternoon, Obina sat alone in the study, reviewing company reports, when he overheard two workers gossiping nearby. "I heard Madame Vanessa postponed the wedding. She probably doesn't want to marry a cripple." "Shoo!" The whispers faded quickly, but the damage remained. Obina closed the file slowly. Even the staff had begun noticing the tension. That evening, Vanessa sat scrolling through luxury vacation pictures online while Obina watched television silently. Suddenly she spoke. "My friends are asking questions." "What kind of questions?" "About us." Obina looked toward her. "And?" She shrugged carelessly. "They think it's strange postponing the wedding indefinitely." "Do you?" Vanessa hesitated. Then quickly, "No." But again, the hesitation exposed her. Obina turned back toward the television quietly. Every day he became more certain. The woman he planned to marry loved the life he provided more than the man himself. And that realization hurt more deeply than the accident. Among all the uncomfortable changes happening inside the mansion, one person remained strangely constant. Amara Daniels. Unlike the others, she behaved naturally around him. She never stared awkwardly at his wheelchair, never pitted him openly, never forced fake sympathy. She simply cared for him quietly. At first, Obina barely noticed her beyond normal staff interactions. She was one of the younger maids working in the mansion, soft-spoken, hard-working, always respectful. But over time, small things caught his attention. The way she adjusted his blanket carefully during cold evenings. The way she prepared his meals exactly how he liked them without needing reminders. The way she spoke to him normally instead of treating him like fragile glass. One afternoon, while helping arrange medications on the table, she accidentally noticed him struggling emotionally. He had been staring silently at family photographs for almost an hour. Without thinking, she spoke softly. "Sir." Obina looked up slowly. "You should rest." Her voice carried genuine concern. Not forced sympathy, just kindness. Something about it felt comforting. "Thank you," he replied quietly. She smiled gently before leaving the room. For reasons he could not explain, that small interaction stayed in his mind all evening. Days passed, then weeks, and the atmosphere inside the mansion grew heavier. Vanessa became increasingly distant. Sometimes she spent entire days outside. Other times she sat physically beside Obina while emotionally somewhere else entirely. One evening, Obina overheard her arguing angrily on the phone upstairs. "I didn't sign up for this." Silence. "No, you don't understand." Another pause. "He may never walk again." Obina sat frozen downstairs while her voice continued faintly through the hallway. "My whole life is changing because of this." Something painful twisted inside his chest. Not because she was frustrated, but because she sounded trapped, like loving him had become punishment. Later that night, Vanessa entered the bedroom pretending nothing happened. But Obina said nothing, because deep down, he already knew where things were heading. Around midnight, unable to sleep, Obina wheeled himself slowly toward the mansion balcony. Rain drizzled lightly across Lagos again. The cool wind brushed against his face while distant city lights shimmered beautifully across the water. For several minutes, he sat there silently, thinking, remembering, questioning everything. Then suddenly he heard soft footsteps behind him. Amara. She carried a tray carefully. "I made tea," she said quietly. Obina looked surprised. "At this hour? You haven't eaten since evening." He stared at her briefly, then accepted the tea. "Thank you." She nodded softly. For a moment neither spoke. Then she carefully pulled another chair nearby and sat down. Not too close, Not too far. Just enough to keep him company. And strangely, that simple act touched him deeply. No cameras, no social media, no performance. Just quiet human kindness. They sat listening to rainfall together in comfortable silence. And for the first time since returning home, Obinna felt slightly less alone. 3 months after the accident, the mansion no longer felt like a home. To Obinna Okafor, it felt like a giant museum filled with expensive loneliness. Every corner carried silence. The grand piano in the living room remained untouched. The private cinema downstairs stayed dark for weeks. The luxurious swimming pool outside sparkled beautifully every morning. Yet nobody used it anymore. Even the workers moved around quietly now, as though loud sounds might remind everyone that tragedy lived inside the mansion. Obinna sat alone in his study one humid afternoon while rain clouds gathered heavily over Lagos again. The wheelchair rested beside the giant glass windows overlooking the city. On the desk before him sat several financial reports and company updates. But he wasn't reading them. He was thinking about Vanessa, about the growing distance between them, about the coldness slowly replacing love. The signs had become impossible to ignore now. She rarely touched him anymore, rarely smiled genuinely, rarely looked at him with affection. Sometimes when she thought he wasn't paying attention, she stared at his wheelchair with quiet frustration. And each time, something inside Obinna broke a little more. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." The office door opened carefully. Amara Daniels stepped inside carrying a tray of food. "You skipped breakfast again," she said softly. Obinna sighed faintly. "I wasn't hungry." Amara placed the tray carefully on the table. "You still need to eat." Unlike everyone else in the mansion, she never sounded nervous around him anymore. There was no fake politeness and no forced pity. Just sincerity. Obinna glanced at the food briefly. "Thank you." She nodded gently before turning to leave. Then suddenly she paused. "Sir." "Yes. You shouldn't stay alone in this room too much." Obinna looked surprised. "It's not healthy." For a moment he almost smiled. Everybody else treated him like a billionaire. Amara treated him like a human being. "I'll be fine," he replied quietly. She hesitated slightly before finally leaving the office. The moment the door closed, Obinna leaned back deeply in his chair. Then his eyes drifted toward the financial reports again. And slowly, an idea formed in his mind. A dangerous idea. The first test had revealed cracks in Vanessa's love. Now he needed the final truth. That evening, the mansion hosted a small dinner gathering for a few close associates and family friends. At least that was the original plan. But one by one, guests canceled. Business emergency. Out of town. Another engagement. By 8 p.m., only 3 guests had arrived. Even Tunbako left early after receiving a phone call. The once lively mansion now struggled to hold even small gatherings. Obinna noticed Vanessa becoming increasingly irritated throughout the evening. As she sat across from him at the dining table, she barely touched her food. Instead, she scrolled endlessly through her phone. Finally, she sighed dramatically. "This is depressing." Obinna looked up calmly. "What is this?" She gestured vaguely around the mansion. "The atmosphere." Silence lingered briefly. Then Obinna asked quietly, "What kind of atmosphere should there be?" Vanessa immediately realized how harsh she sounded. "That's not what I meant." "Then explain." She dropped her fork frustratedly. "Everything changed, Obinna." There it was again. Not "we changed." Everything changed. As though his accident ruined her personal happiness. Obinna nodded slowly. "Yes," he replied softly. "It did." Vanessa looked away immediately. The dinner continued awkwardly after that. And once again, Obinna noticed something painful. She no longer looked at him like a fiancé. She looked at him like a responsibility. Later that night, Obinna wheeled himself slowly into his private office again. The mansion had become quiet. Most of the staff were asleep already. He opened his laptop carefully and began reviewing confidential company information. Not because he needed to, but because he was preparing the next stage of his test. For several minutes, he stared silently at the glowing screen. Then he picked up his phone and dialed Dr. Hassan. The older doctor answered after a few rings. "Mr. Okafor? I need another favor." The doctor sighed immediately. "I don't like the sound of that." Obinna smiled faintly without humor. "I need people to believe my condition has affected my role at the company." Silence. "You're taking this too far." "Am I?" "Yes." Obinna stared out toward the dark city beyond his windows. "Doctor, if someone only loves me because I'm powerful, shouldn't I know that before marrying them?" Dr. Hassan hesitated. "You already suspect the answer." "I need certainty." The doctor's voice softened slightly. "And if the answer hurts?" Obinna closed his eyes briefly. "It already does." Silence followed again. Finally, the doctor spoke quietly. "What exactly do you want people to believe?" "That I've lost control of the company." "That's risky." "I can handle it." "You're gambling with your relationships." Obinna laughed bitterly. "What relationships?" The doctor had no answer for that. The following morning, Obinna arranged everything carefully. He instructed his legal team privately, contacted trusted executives secretly, prepared fake financial distress documents. Only 2 people knew the full truth: Obinna himself and Dr. Hassan. Everyone else would believe the lie, especially Vanessa. That evening, rain poured heavily outside while Vanessa prepared for another outing with her friends. She stood before the bedroom mirror adjusting her expensive earrings while music played softly from her phone. Obinna watched quietly from his wheelchair. "You're going out again?" he asked. "Yes." "With who?" "Just friends." She sprayed perfume lightly onto her neck. Obinna noticed how glamorous she still dressed even for casual outings. Designer heels, diamond jewelry, luxury handbags. Everything about Vanessa loved attention. "Can you stay tonight?" Obinna asked quietly. Vanessa paused slightly. "I already promised them." The answer hurt more than expected. Not because she wanted to leave, but because she didn't even hesitate. Then slowly, Obinna spoke. "There's something important we need to discuss first." Her expression shifted immediately. "What happened?" Obinna lowered his eyes deliberately. "I got a call from the board today." Vanessa's face tightened slightly. "And they want me removed as CEO." Silence. The room suddenly felt colder. "What?" "They believe my condition makes investors uncomfortable." Vanessa stared at him in disbelief. "They can't do that." "They can." No, you built that company." Obinna nodded slowly. "Yes." Vanessa sat down carefully on the edge of the bed. "What happens now?" Obinna inhaled quietly. "I still own shares, but operational control may change." Vanessa looked visibly shaken now. "But your money." He looked away deliberately before speaking. "I've spent most of it on surgeries, treatments, and legal battles." Her eyes widened slowly. "What do you mean most?" Obinna remained silent for a moment. Then softly, "I'm nearly broke." The words landed heavily inside the room. Vanessa blinked repeatedly, almost like her brain refused to process them. "No." Obinna nodded faintly. "I may need to sell some properties soon." Silence. Pure silence. Then slowly Vanessa stood up. She looked around the luxurious bedroom as though seeing it differently for the first time. "The mansion too?" "Possibly." Her breathing changed immediately. Fast. Uneven. "But your businesses?" "Several investments collapsed after the accident." Vanessa shook her head slowly. "No." Obinna continued quietly. "I tried protecting everything." Her voice became sharper now. "How bad is it exactly?" "Bad." Another silence followed. Then finally, Vanessa whispered, "Oh my God." She turned away from him completely. And in that exact moment, Obinna saw the truth clearly. Not concern for his emotional pain. Not sympathy for losing his empire. Only fear. Fear for herself. Fear of losing luxury. Fear of becoming ordinary. For several minutes, Vanessa paced around the room anxiously. Questions poured from her rapidly. What about the wedding? What about the London apartment? The investments in Dubai? What about your private accounts? Each question revealed more than the last. Obinna answered carefully, pretending exhaustion. Things are complicated. Vanessa ran both hands through her hair in frustration. This is insane. I know. No. You don't understand. Her voice cracked sharply now. My entire future was built around stability. Obinna looked up slowly. Stability? Vanessa immediately realized how terrible that sounded. That's not what I meant. But it was exactly what she meant. And both of them knew it. Obinna stared at her silently while she avoided eye contact completely. For the first time since they met, the illusion between them was collapsing openly. Later that night, Vanessa skipped dinner entirely. Instead, she locked herself inside another room for hours making phone calls. Obinna overheard fragments while passing through the hallway. He's losing everything. I don't know what to do. The company is removing him. Each sentence stabbed deeper than the last. Meanwhile downstairs, Amara quietly prepared tea in the kitchen. When Obinna wheeled himself inside, she immediately noticed his expression. You look troubled. He forced a faint smile. Long day. Amara placed a cup before him gently. Everything will be okay. Simple words. Yet somehow they sounded more sincere than anything Vanessa had said in months. Obinna looked at her carefully. Do you really believe that? Yes. Why? Amara shrugged softly. Because difficult times don't last forever. Obinna stared at her silently. If only she knew how much those words affected him. If only she knew how rare genuine kindness had become in his world. Upstairs, Vanessa remained locked inside the guest room. Downstairs, the maid sat quietly beside him while rain tapped against the windows. And suddenly, the contrast between the two women became impossible to ignore. One stayed physically close but emotionally distant. The other expected nothing, yet somehow gave him peace. Around midnight, Vanessa finally returned to their bedroom. Her makeup was slightly smudged from stress. Without speaking, she removed her jewelry aggressively and sat on the bed. Obinna watched her quietly. Then finally he asked, Are you all right? She laughed bitterly. Do I look all right? Silence. Then she suddenly turned toward him. Why didn't you prepare for situations like this? Obinna frowned slightly. What? You're a billionaire. You should have protected yourself better. The words shocked even him. Protected himself better? After surviving a near-fatal accident? For several seconds, Obinna simply stared at her. And in that moment, something inside him quietly began dying. Not love completely, but hope. Hope that she would still choose him if everything disappeared. Because now, he was beginning to realize she already wouldn't. After the conversation about money, everything inside the mansion changed completely. Not suddenly, not dramatically at first, but slowly, like a beautiful glass slowly cracking under pressure. Obinna Okafor noticed it in the little things first. Vanessa Cole stopped asking about his therapy sessions. Stopped pretending to care about his recovery. Stopped sitting beside him during meals. Some mornings she left the mansion before sunrise without explanation. Other nights she returned long after midnight smelling of expensive perfume and alcohol. Whenever Obinna asked where she had been, her answers became shorter each time. Out. With friends. Busy. Nothing more. And strangely, Obinna no longer felt shocked. Only disappointed. Deep down, he already knew the truth. The woman he planned to marry was emotionally leaving him little by little. The official goodbye simply had not happened yet. One humid afternoon, Obinna sat alone in the living room while rain poured heavily outside the giant glass windows. The television played quietly in the background, but he wasn't watching. His thoughts felt too loud. A business news station discussed leadership changes inside major Nigerian companies. One analyst suddenly mentioned the Okafor Group. With Obinna Okafor's health condition remaining uncertain, many investors are concerned about the company's future. Obinna muted the television immediately. Silence filled the room again. A few months ago, hearing people question his strength would have angered him. Now it simply exhausted him. He rubbed his forehead slowly before reaching for the wheelchair controls. As he turned toward the dining area, he noticed something painful. The mansion looked emptier again. 2 housekeepers had resigned that week already. 1 chef claimed family problems. A security guard requested transfer. Even some longtime workers no longer behaved the same way around him. The atmosphere inside the mansion had become uncomfortable, heavy, as though everybody could sense the collapse happening quietly beneath the surface. Just then, Amara Daniels entered carrying folded laundry. Unlike everyone else, she still greeted him warmly. "Good afternoon, sir." Obinna nodded faintly. "Afternoon." She immediately noticed his mood. "You haven't eaten again." "I'm not hungry." "That's what you said yesterday too." Her tone carried gentle firmness that strangely reminded him of his mother. Before he could respond, the front door suddenly opened loudly. Vanessa walked inside speaking angrily on her phone. "I'm serious, Cynthia. I cannot live like this forever." The moment she noticed Obinna and Amara nearby, she stopped abruptly. "I'll call you back." She ended the call quickly. An awkward silence followed. Amara quietly excused herself and disappeared upstairs. Vanessa removed her heels irritably and dropped her handbag onto the couch. "You're home early," Obinna said calmly. She shrugged. "My meeting ended." Obinna looked at her carefully. "What meeting?" "A business brunch." "With who?" Vanessa sighed dramatically. "Why are you interrogating me?" "I asked a simple question." She avoided eye contact while pouring herself wine. Lately, she drank more often now. Another change Obinna noticed. "I'm tired," she muttered. Then, without another word, she disappeared upstairs. Obinna remained downstairs staring quietly at the staircase long after she left. The distance between them no longer felt reparable. Days passed. Then more tension arrived. Vanessa began complaining openly now. About the house. About stress. About money. One evening, while reviewing fake financial documents in his study, Obinna overheard her arguing with someone downstairs. "I sold my designer watch already." Silence. "No, you don't understand. Things are bad." Obinna frowned deeply. Sold her watch? That surprised him. He had secretly ensured she still had access to money. Unless she had started spending recklessly out of panic. Later that night during dinner, Vanessa barely touched her food. Instead, she stared around the luxurious dining room with visible frustration. Finally she spoke. "How long before we lose this house?" Obinna answered carefully. "I don't know." She laughed bitterly. "You don't know." "Vanessa." "No, seriously. You built an empire and somehow everything collapsed within months." Her voice carried blame now, as though he chose the accident. Obinna stayed calm. "I'm trying to manage things." "That's the problem," she snapped suddenly. "You keep trying instead of fixing them." Silence filled the dining room instantly. Even the nearby workers froze uncomfortably. Vanessa realized she had shouted too loudly. But instead of apologizing, she stood abruptly. "I'm going out." "At this hour? I need air." Then she stormed away. The front door slammed moments later. Obinna closed his eyes slowly. The final collapse was approaching. He could feel it. Later that same night, the rain became violent. Thunder shook the mansion while lightning flashed across Lego skies. Obinna sat awake alone in the dark living room, unable to sleep. Pain medication rested untouched beside him. His chest hurt more emotionally than physically now. He thought about the old days with Vanessa, how they met at a charity gala, how beautiful she looked during their first date, how she once laughed easily around him. But now, looking back honestly, had she ever truly loved him? Or had he simply ignored the signs because he wanted companionship? The question haunted him deeply. Soft footsteps interrupted his thoughts. Amara entered quietly carrying tea. "You're awake again." Obinna gave a tired smile. "So are you." "I heard thunder." She placed the tea gently before him. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then softly, Amara asked, "Are you okay?" Such a simple question. Yet somehow it nearly broke him emotionally, because unlike everyone else, she genuinely meant it. Obinna stared into the steaming tea quietly. "Have you ever felt abandoned before?" he asked suddenly. Amara hesitated slightly. "Yes." He looked up. "My father left when I was young," she explained softly. "Then my mother died years later." Obinna listened silently. Sometimes people disappear when life becomes difficult. The words hung heavily in the room. Then she added gently, "But the right people stay." Obinna looked away quickly, because suddenly, emotion tightened painfully in his throat. The next morning, the mansion woke to chaos. 2 more workers resigned unexpectedly. 1 driver, one cleaner. The house manager explained awkwardly. They said they found better opportunities. But everyone knew the truth. Rumors about Obinna's financial collapse were spreading rapidly. People no longer viewed the mansion as stable employment. Even loyalty had conditions. Vanessa became furious after hearing the news. "This is embarrassing." Obinna remained calm. "We'll hire replacements." "With what money?" The cruelty in her tone shocked even herself. Silence followed instantly, but she did not apologize. Instead, she continued pacing angrily. "Everything is falling apart." Obinna watched her carefully. Not once during the entire outburst did she ask how he felt emotionally. Not once. Only fear for herself, fear of discomfort, fear of losing status. And finally, the moment arrived. 3 days later, Vanessa entered the living room carrying 2 large suitcases. Obinna immediately understood. "Still," he asked quietly, "what's this?" Vanessa avoided his eyes completely. "I'm leaving." The words landed heavily despite how expected they were. Obinna stared at her silently. "For how long?" She laughed bitterly. "Obinna, stop pretending you don't understand." The mansion suddenly felt terribly quiet. Rain tapped softly against the windows again. Finally, Obinna spoke. "So this is it." Vanessa crossed her arms defensively. "I tried." "Did you?" "Yes," she snapped. "I stayed for months. Because you hoped things would improve. That's unfair." "No," Obinna replied quietly. "It's honest." Her face tightened instantly. "You think this is easy for me?" Obinna said nothing. Vanessa pointed angrily toward the wheelchair. "My life changed overnight too. And whose fault is that?" "I didn't say it was your fault. But you resent me for it." Silence. Painful silence. Then finally Vanessa exploded. "Yes, I resent this." Her voice echoed through the mansion loudly. "I resent the hospitals. I resent the pity. I resent watching everything collapse." Tears filled her eyes angrily now. "I cannot spend my entire life taking care of a broke cripple." The words sliced through the room like knives. Even the workers nearby froze in horror. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Obinna simply stared at her quietly. Not angry, not shocked, just deeply hurt. Because despite expecting betrayal, hearing it aloud still destroyed something inside him. Vanessa wiped her tears aggressively. "I deserve a better life than this." Obinna lowered his gaze briefly. Then softly, "A better life. Yes. Not better love. Not better relationship. A better life." The choice of words said everything. Slowly, Vanessa removed her engagement ring. The diamond sparkled beneath the chandelier lights one final time before she dropped it onto the table. "I can't do this anymore." Obinna looked at the ring silently, then back at her. "Did you ever love me?" Vanessa froze briefly. For a second, guilt crossed her face. But only for a second. Then she looked away. "I don't know anymore." The answer hurt worse than a lie, because it sounded partially true. Without another word, she grabbed her suitcases, then walked toward the entrance. No goodbye kiss, no final embrace, no apology, just footsteps fading across marble floors. And moments later, the front door closed behind her. Gone. Just like that. The mansion became painfully silent afterward. Obina remained motionless beside the table, staring at the engagement ring for a very long time. Somewhere upstairs, workers whispered quietly. Nobody knew what to say. Eventually, footsteps approached carefully. Amara. She stopped when she saw the suitcases gone. Then her eyes slowly moved toward the ring on the table. Understanding crossed her face instantly. She left. Obina nodded once. Amara's expression softened sadly. For a moment, neither spoke. Then quietly, she asked, "Have you eaten today?" The question surprised him. "Not. Are you angry? Will she return?" What happened? Just concern for him. Obina looked up slowly. And for the first time since Vanessa walked away, the crushing loneliness eased slightly. Because despite everything, one person still remained. The mansion felt emptier after Vanessa Cole left. Not just physically empty, emotionally empty. The silence inside the massive Banana Island home became unbearable at times. Every hallway echoed differently now. Every room felt colder. For days, Obina Okafor barely left his bedroom. The engagement ring Vanessa abandoned still sat inside one of the drawers near his bed, untouched. Sometimes he stared at it for several minutes. Not because he missed her, but because he hated what the ring represented now. Failure. Illusion. False love. The woman he planned to spend forever with had walked away the moment she believed forever would become difficult. And somehow, that truth hurt more than the accident itself. Outside, Lagos life continued normally. Traffic still flooded the roads. Nightclubs still pulsed with music. Businessmen still fought over contracts. But inside the mansion, everything had slowed down. Many workers resigned shortly after Vanessa left. Some feared the company was truly collapsing. Others believed Obina would soon sell the mansion. Within 2 weeks, the staff reduced drastically. The second chef left. 2 cleaners resigned. 1 security guard disappeared without notice. Soon only a handful of workers remained. And among them, only one person still cared for Obina wholeheartedly. Amara Daniels. Every morning before sunrise, she cleaned the mansion almost entirely by herself. She prepared Obina's breakfast carefully, handled laundry, managed medications, even helped organize company documents whenever necessary. Yet, despite the exhausting workload, she never complained. Not once. One rainy morning, Obina sat quietly in the dining room staring blankly at untouched food. Heavy clouds darkened the sky outside while soft gospel music played faintly from the kitchen radio. Amara entered carrying fresh tea. "You barely ate yesterday," she said gently. "I'm not hungry." "That's becoming your favorite sentence." Obina almost smiled faintly. Almost. Amara adjusted the tray before him carefully. "You need strength." "For what?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. Amara looked at him quietly. "For life." Obina looked away immediately. Sometimes her simple words affected him more deeply than long speeches from others. He picked up the spoon reluctantly. "That's better," she said softly. As she turned to leave, Obina suddenly noticed something unusual. The grocery bags near the kitchen looked smaller than normal. Much smaller. "Amara." She turned. "Yes, sir? Where are the supplies from yesterday?" Her expression changed slightly. "We're managing what's left." Obina frowned. "The accounts department didn't send money?" Silence. Then softly, "No." Obina's jaw tightened immediately. He had secretly arranged delays in payments to maintain the illusion of financial struggle. But seeing the real effects inside the mansion suddenly made him uncomfortable. "And nobody told me?" Amara forced a small smile. "We're okay." But the smile looked tired. Very tired. Later that afternoon, Obina wheeled himself slowly toward the kitchen. The mansion felt unusually quiet again. As he approached, he heard soft sounds inside. Pots moving. Cabinets opening. Then he noticed Amara standing beside the counter, carefully separating small portions of rice into containers. The sight bothered him instantly. There was barely enough food. "Amara." She turned quickly, startled. "Sir? You shouldn't stress yourself moving around alone." Obina ignored that completely. Why are the supplies this low? She hesitated. The remaining money wasn't enough. And the other workers? They've been buying food outside. Obinna stared around the kitchen slowly. For the first time in years, his mansion kitchen looked poor. The realization hit strangely hard. Then his eyes moved toward a small nylon bag on the counter. Inside were vegetables, noodles, and bread. Simple things. Cheap things. Where did those come from? He asked quietly. Amara avoided eye contact briefly. I bought them. With whose money? Silence. Then softly, mine. Obinna froze. What? She forced another small smile. You needed food. The words landed heavily inside him. He stared at her properly now. Really properly. Her clothes looked slightly older than before. Her shoes worn. Her hands tired from work. And suddenly, guilt twisted painfully inside his chest. Because while pretending to be broke, he forgot other people were sacrificing real things around him. You used your salary? Amara nodded gently. You shouldn't have done that. Why not? Because it's not your responsibility. She looked at him quietly for a moment, then finally spoke. You helped me once when nobody else would. Obinna frowned slightly. What do you mean? Amara leaned lightly against the counter. You probably don't remember. He watched her carefully. My first week in Lagos, I almost slept under a bridge. Obinna stayed silent. I came from Bainway looking for work after my mother died. Her voice remained calm, but sadness lingered beneath it. I had no family here, no money, nothing. The kitchen became very quiet. One afternoon I fainted outside one of your office buildings because I hadn't eaten. Something flickered faintly in Obinna's memory. Rain. Security guards. A frightened young girl. You were there, Amara continued softly. The security men wanted to chase me away. Obinna slowly remembered. He had stopped after leaving a meeting. The girl looked exhausted. Starving. He gave instructions immediately. Food. Money. Temporary accommodation. Then later, through one of his managers, he arranged a cleaning job inside the company. You gave me work, Amara said quietly, when nobody cared whether I survived. Obinna stared at her speechlessly. Honestly, he barely remembered the incident. To him, it was one small act of kindness years ago. But clearly, to her, it changed everything. You rebuilt your life, he said softly. Amara smiled faintly. You helped me start again. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then she added quietly, so now it's my turn. Those words hit him harder than expected. Because unlike everyone else who abandoned him during weakness, this woman remembered kindness. Not money. Not status. Kindness. That evening, heavy rain poured across Lagos again. Electricity flickered briefly while thunder echoed outside. Obinna sat in the living room watching Amara move around the mansion cleaning alone. The sight unsettled him deeply. She was doing the work of several people now. Yet she still moved with patience. Still spoke kindly. Still checked whether he had eaten. No complaints. No bitterness. Meanwhile, people who enjoyed his wealth for years disappeared the moment comfort vanished. The contrast haunted him. Eventually, he spoke. Amara. She looked up from arranging bookshelves. Yes. Why haven't you left? The question surprised her slightly. What do you mean? Everyone else is leaving. She smiled gently. I'm not everyone else. Obinna wheeled himself closer slowly. You believe I'm broke. She nodded once. You believe I may never walk again. Another nod. So why stay? Amara became quiet briefly. Then she sat down carefully opposite him. When my mother was sick, she said softly, people avoided us. Obinna listened silently. Relatives disappeared. Neighbors stopped helping. Everybody acted like poverty was contagious. Pain flickered briefly across her face. I promised myself then that if anybody ever showed me kindness during my struggles, I would never forget. Her eyes lifted toward him gently. You were good to me when I had nothing. Obinna swallowed hard. So leaving you now would make me a terrible person. The sincerity in her voice shattered something inside him emotionally, because there was no performance in her words, no manipulation, just honesty. And suddenly, after months of betrayal, disappointment, and loneliness, Obinna felt something unfamiliar again. Peace. Days passed quietly after that conversation, and slowly, life inside the mansion changed. Not dramatically, but gently. Amara began eating meals with Obinna sometimes instead of disappearing into the staff quarters. At first, she resisted whenever he invited her. "Sir, it's not proper." But eventually she agreed occasionally. Their conversations started small. Food, weather, movies, then gradually became deeper. Childhood memories, dreams, pain. Obinna found himself laughing again sometimes. Real laughter, not fake corporate smiles. And surprisingly, the mansion no longer felt completely empty. One evening during dinner, Amara accidentally spilled juice while laughing at one of his stories. "Oh no!" She panicked immediately and rushed to clean it. But Obinna laughed harder instead. "It's fine." She stared at him surprised. "You're laughing. So, you haven't laughed properly in months." The realization stunned him slightly, because she was right. For the first time since the accident, he genuinely felt alive again. Later that night, Obinna sat alone in his room thinking deeply. Rain tapped softly against the windows while city lights shimmered across the distance. His eyes drifted toward his motionless legs beneath the blanket. Then toward the doorway where Amara had stood moments earlier wishing him good night. A strange emotion settled quietly inside his chest. Warm, gentle, dangerous. And for the first time, Obinna began realizing something terrifying. The woman who stayed beside him during his darkest season was slowly becoming the most important person in his life. The mansion no longer felt haunted by silence. Not completely. Ever since Amara Daniels became more involved in Obinna Okafor's daily life, warmth had slowly started returning to the massive home. Little by little, like sunlight entering a dark room through tiny cracks. The luxurious Banana Island mansion was still mostly empty. Many workers had already resigned, believing the billionaire's empire was collapsing beyond repair. But strangely, Obinna no longer cared much about the people who left, because for the first time in months, he had found peace in someone unexpected. Amara. One Saturday morning, sunlight poured beautifully through the dining room windows, while soft high-life music played quietly from the kitchen. Obinna sat at the table reviewing company files when he suddenly frowned. "Something smells good." Amara laughed softly from the kitchen. "That's because I'm cooking real food today instead of hospital-style meals." Obinna smiled faintly. Over the past few weeks, their conversations had become easier. Natural. No tension and no pretending. Around Amara, Obinna never felt pressured to act strong or wealthy. She spoke to him like a normal person. And after living among fake people for years, normal suddenly felt priceless. A few minutes later, she appeared carrying a tray carefully. Jollof rice, plantain, chicken stew. Obinna stared dramatically. "You cooked all this?" "Yes." "For 2 people?" Amara shrugged playfully. "You need strength." Obinna laughed quietly. Again, that surprised him. Lately, laughter came easier around her. Amara placed the food down carefully before sitting opposite him. At first she used to refuse sitting beside him during meals, but eventually he insisted enough times that it became normal. As they ate, Obinna noticed she looked happier too lately, less tense, less guarded. "What?" she asked after noticing him staring. "You smile more now." Amara looked down shyly. "So do you." The moment became awkward suddenly. Not uncomfortable, just different. Both of them felt it, and both quickly looked away. That afternoon, heavy rain trapped them indoors. The weather in Lagos had become unpredictable lately. 1 minute sunshine, the next minute storms swallowing the entire sky. Electricity flickered briefly while thunder echoed outside. Amara entered the living room carrying candles. "In case power goes again." Obinna watched her quietly. Simple moments like this affected him strangely now. Watching her move around the mansion, hearing her laugh softly, listening to her sing while cleaning. Without realizing it, she had become part of his peace. Suddenly, the lights went out completely. Darkness swallowed the room. Amara groaned dramatically. "Nipa again!" Obinna chuckled. "Come help me with the candles." Together they lit candles around the living room while rain battered the windows heavily. Golden light flickered softly across the room, creating a strangely beautiful atmosphere. Amara sat down afterward with a tired sigh. "This mansion is scary during blackout." Obinna smirked slightly. "You're afraid?" "A little. You live here. That doesn't mean ghosts won't visit." Obinna laughed again. Proper laugh this time. Amara smiled, watching him carefully. For a moment, neither spoke. The candlelight danced softly across her face. And suddenly, Obinna noticed things he had ignored before. How beautiful her eyes were. How gentle her smile looked. How peaceful he felt around her. The realization unsettled him slightly, because this was no longer simple gratitude. Something deeper was growing. Something dangerous. Later that night, the rain continued endlessly. The mansion remained dark except for candlelight scattered around the living room. Amara sat cross-legged on the carpet sorting laundry while Obinna watched an old movie quietly. Eventually, she started laughing at one dramatic scene. "This acting is terrible." Obinna smiled. "You're insulting a classic movie. The man has been dying for 20 minutes. That's cinema." Amara laughed harder. And somehow, hearing her laugh filled the giant room with life again. After several minutes, she suddenly became thoughtful. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "What was it like?" Obinna looked confused. "What?" "Being rich." He blinked. "You say that like I died." Amara smiled sheepishly. "You know what I mean." Obinna leaned back thoughtfully. "I don't know." "What do you mean you don't know?" "I got used to it." She shook her head. "That's impossible." "No, seriously." After a while, expensive things stopped feeling special. Amara looked unconvinced. "You owned private jets. And you had houses in different countries." Obinna shrugged faintly. "But I still ate food one mouthful at a time like everybody else." Amara laughed softly. Then his expression became quieter. "The truth is, money solves problems. But it also attracts fake people." The atmosphere shifted slightly. Amara lowered her voice. "You mean Vanessa?" Obinna looked away briefly. "Yes." Silence followed. Then softly, Amara asked, "Did you love her?" Obinna thought carefully before answering. "I think I loved the idea of not being alone." The honesty surprised even him. Amara stopped folding clothes slowly. "That sounds painful." "It is." For several seconds, neither spoke again. Rain tapped gently against the windows while candlelight flickered between them. Then Amara said quietly, "You deserve someone who stays." The words touched him deeply, because she wasn't trying to flirt. She genuinely believed it. And somehow, that sincerity mattered more than beauty ever could. Days turned into weeks, and the connection between them deepened naturally. They began spending evenings together regularly, sometimes watching movies, sometimes cooking, sometimes simply talking for hours. Obinna learned things about Amara nobody else knew. How she loved gospel music while cleaning. How she secretly wanted to study nursing someday. How she still sent money to distant relatives despite barely having enough herself. Meanwhile, Amara learned things about Obinna the public never saw. How he hated arrogant rich men. How he secretly loved old Nollywood films. How deeply lonely he truly was. One evening during dinner, Amara suddenly laughed loudly after Obinna told an embarrassing childhood story. "You climbed a mango tree and got stuck? I was 9. And your mother beat you afterward?" "She beat me before helping me down." Amara nearly choked from laughter. Obinna stared at her smiling. And suddenly, the room became quiet again. Their eyes met. Something shifted. Neither looked away immediately this time. The air itself suddenly felt heavier, warmer, dangerous. Amara lowered her eyes first. I should clean the kitchen. She stood too quickly and almost dropped a plate. Obinna smiled faintly to himself after she hurried away. Because now he knew. She felt it too. That same night, Obinna could not sleep. He sat alone beside the window in his bedroom watching Lagos lights shimmer beneath the dark sky. His mind replayed every recent moment with Amara. Her smile, her voice, the way she looked at him. And for the first time since the accident, the future no longer looked empty. That realization terrified him slightly, because technically, he was still lying to her. The wheelchair, the fake financial collapse, everything. Guilt pressed heavily against his chest. Yet despite the deception, his feelings had become real, very real. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Come in. Amara stepped inside nervously carrying tea. I thought you might still be awake. Obinna smiled softly. You know me too well now. She placed the tea carefully near him, then turned to leave. But suddenly, Amara. She paused. Yes. Obinna hesitated. Then quietly, thank you. For what? For staying. Silence filled the room gently. Amara looked at him with soft eyes. You don't have to thank me. But I want to. Her expression warmed slightly. Then softly she replied, I'm happy I stayed. Those simple words settled deeply inside him. And before either of them fully realized what was happening, the distance between them disappeared. Obinna reached for her hand slowly. Amara froze. Their fingers touched gently. Electricity rushed through both of them instantly. Neither spoke. Neither moved. The world outside seemed to disappear completely. Only the two of them existed in that moment. Then quietly, almost like a whisper, Obinna said, You make this place feel alive again. Amara's eyes filled with emotion immediately. And for the first time since the accident, hope returned to Obinna's heart. Not because of money. Not because of power. But because somewhere between heartbreak, loneliness, and pain, two broken people had slowly found each other. For the first time in many months, Obinna Okafor was afraid. Not of losing money. Not of losing power. Not even of being abandoned again. He was afraid of losing Amara Daniels. That realization disturbed him deeply, because over the past few weeks, what began as gratitude had transformed into something real. Something powerful. Love. Real love. The kind that arrived quietly and settled deeply inside the heart before you even noticed it happening. And now, the lie between them was becoming unbearable. Every time Amara helped push his wheelchair, guilt stabbed through him. Every time she sacrificed her comfort for him, the guilt worsened. Every smile she gave him freely felt undeserved. Because unlike Vanessa, Amara loved him believing he had absolutely nothing left. And that truth made her love priceless, which also made his deception cruel. That morning, the mansion felt unusually peaceful. Sunlight poured through the large windows while soft gospel music played faintly from the kitchen. Amara moved around humming quietly as she cleaned the living room. Obinna watched her from across the room silently. She looked happy today, relaxed, beautiful, and suddenly his chest tightened painfully, because he knew what he had to do. Tell her the truth. Before things went further. Before she heard it from someone else. Before the lie destroyed everything. Amara. She looked up immediately. Yes. Can we talk later? Her smile faded slightly. The seriousness in his voice worried her instantly. Did something happen? Obinna hesitated. Yes. Her expression tightened immediately. Is it bad? He looked away briefly. I don't know. The entire day felt painfully slow afterward. Amara remained unusually quiet while preparing meals. Several times, Obinna caught her staring at him worriedly. Clearly her mind was imagining terrible possibilities already. Perhaps she thought his health had worsened. Or maybe the company had completely collapsed. Meanwhile, Obinna struggled internally. Part of him wanted to continue the lie forever. Because inside the lie, he had discovered something beautiful. Someone beautiful. But another part of him knew real love could not survive deception forever. especially not with someone as genuine as Amara. By evening, heavy rain began falling again across Lagos. Thunder rolled softly through the dark sky while cool wind brushed against the mansion windows. The atmosphere felt strangely emotional, almost like the weather itself understood something life-changing was coming. Obinna sat inside his private office staring blankly at the floor when Amara knocked gently. "You wanted to talk?" He looked up slowly. "Yes." She entered carefully, closing the door behind her. Immediately she noticed his expression. Tense, uneasy. Fear crept quietly into her chest. "What happened?" Obinna gestured toward the chair opposite him. "Sit down." Amara obeyed slowly. For several seconds, silence filled the room. Then finally Obinna spoke. "There's something I should have told you a long time ago." Amara frowned slightly. "What is it?" Obinna inhaled deeply. And then, slowly, he stood up. Amara blinked. For 1 second, her brain failed to understand what she was seeing. Then suddenly her eyes widened completely. The chair scraped loudly against the floor as she stood abruptly. "You!" Her voice shook violently. "You can walk." Obinna nodded slowly. Shock exploded across her face instantly. "No." She stepped backward. "No, no." Obinna moved carefully toward her. "Amara, don't touch me." The pain in her voice stopped him instantly. Tears filled her eyes rapidly as disbelief consumed her. "You lied to me? Please let me explain." All this time, her chest rose unevenly now. The wheelchair, the treatments, the money. Obinna lowered his gaze briefly. "Yes." Amara stared at him like she no longer recognized him. And honestly, in that moment she didn't. "How could you do this to me?" Her voice cracked painfully. Obinna swallowed hard. "At first, it was because of Vanessa. Vanessa. I needed to know who truly loved me." Amara laughed bitterly through tears. "So everybody became part of your little test?" "It wasn't like that." "Really?" She pointed angrily toward him. "You watched me clean this mansion alone. You watched me spend my own money buying food. You watched me cry for you." Every word hit him heavily. Because she was right. Completely right. Obinna ran both hands through his hair frustratedly. "I never meant for things to go this far. But they did." Silence crashed heavily between them. Rain battered the windows outside violently now. Amara shook her head slowly, struggling emotionally. "I defended you." Obinna closed his eyes briefly. "I know. I believed in you. I know. And the whole time you were lying to me." The disappointment in her voice hurt more than anger ever could. Because anger could fade. But disappointment destroyed trust. Amara turned away quickly, wiping tears from her face. "I feel stupid." "You're not stupid. I loved you." The words escaped before she could stop them. Silence followed instantly. Both froze. Amara covered her mouth emotionally. But it was too late. The truth was already out. Obinna stared at her quietly. His heart pounded painfully. Then softly, he said, "I love you too." Amara shook her head immediately. "No. It's true. How can I believe anything you say?" The question shattered him emotionally. Because again, she was right. Obinna moved closer slowly. "Everything between us became real. When? I don't know." His voice softened deeply. "Maybe the night you brought me tea during the storm. Maybe the first time you laughed at my terrible jokes. Maybe the day you used your own money to feed me." Emotion tightened painfully in his chest. "But somewhere along the way, you stopped being part of a test." Amara looked away again as fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. "You should have told me sooner. I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Losing you." That answer weakened her anger slightly. Because despite everything, she could hear the honesty in his voice now. Obinna sat down slowly and buried his face briefly in his hands. "I've spent most of my life surrounded by fake people." Amara remained silent. "People loved my money, my influence, my name." He looked up at her again. "But you," his voice cracked softly, "you stayed when everybody else disappeared." The room became very quiet. Obina continued carefully. When Vanessa thought I was finished, she abandoned me. When the staff thought I was broke, they left. But you stayed. Amara's eyes filled again. You cooked for me. You comforted me. You treated me like a human being even when you thought I had nothing left. His voice became quieter. No one has ever loved me like that before. The honesty in his words shook her emotionally, because deep down, she knew he meant every word. Still, the pain remained. You humiliated me, she whispered. Obina nodded slowly. I know. I trusted you. I know. And now I don't even know what was real anymore. That was real, he said immediately. All of it. Amara stared at him silently. Then finally she asked, So you're still rich? Obina gave a small guilty nod. And still CEO? Yes. She laughed bitterly again. So while I was worrying about feeding you, you were still one of the richest men in Lagos. When you say it like that, I sound evil. You do sound evil. Surprisingly, that almost made him smile slightly. And somehow, the tiny reaction softened the atmosphere a little. Just a little. Minutes later, Amara sat down slowly again. Emotionally exhausted, Obina remained careful now, giving her space. Finally she asked quietly, Why tell me now? Because I couldn't keep lying to you. And if I never found out, I would still have told you eventually. Silence. Then softly, I want a real life with you. Amara looked up sharply. A real life doesn't begin with deception. The words humbled him instantly. Again, she was right. Completely right. Obina nodded slowly. You deserve better than what I did. The sincerity in his voice reached her deeply. For several moments, only rainfall filled the room. Then finally Amara spoke quietly. When my mother died, I stopped trusting people easily. Obina listened silently. And then you came into my life. Her eyes met his again. You made me believe good people still existed. Pain crossed his face immediately. I'm sorry. Amara studied him carefully for a long time. Then finally she sighed deeply. I'm still angry. I know. Very angry. You deserve to be. Another silence followed. Then unexpectedly, she asked, So, you can actually walk properly? Obina blinked, then laughed softly for the first time that night. Yes. Amara shook her head in disbelief. I suffered pushing that wheelchair for nothing. That made both of them laugh slightly through the emotional tension. And somehow, that tiny moment changed everything. Because despite the betrayal, despite the anger, the connection between them remained alive. Real. Stronger than lies. Later that night, Amara stood near the doorway preparing to leave the office. Before exiting, she paused. Without turning around, she asked quietly, So what happens now? Obina looked at her carefully. That depends on you. Finally she turned toward him again. And though hurt still lingered in her eyes, so did love. Real love. The kind strong enough to survive painful truth. I need time, she whispered. Obina nodded gently. I'll wait. And as Amara slowly walked away that night, Obina understood something important for the very first time. Money could attract attention. Power could attract loyalty. But only truth, and genuine love, could bring forgiveness. After the truth came out, the mansion became emotionally tense for several days. Amara Daniels still carried out her duties around the house, but things between her and Obina Okafor were no longer as easy as before. The warmth remained, the love remained, but now there was hurt too, and hurt had a way of creating silence. Some mornings, Obina caught Amara staring at him strangely while he walked across the living room normally. Each time, guilt twisted painfully inside his chest, because seeing him walk reminded her of the lie all over again. One afternoon, Obina entered the kitchen and found Amara quietly preparing soup. The moment she noticed him standing there without the wheelchair, she immediately looked away. That reaction hurt more than anger ever could. Amara. Yes, sir? The sir bothered him instantly. Before, his name sounded softer on her lips. Now distance had returned again. You don't have to call me sir. She continued stirring the pot silently. What should I call you then? My name. Finally she looked at him. For several seconds neither spoke. Then softly, she replied, That still feels strange. Obinna leaned against the counter quietly. I know I hurt you. Amara sighed deeply. I'm trying not to hate you. The honesty almost made him laugh sadly. Fair enough. Despite everything, moments like that slowly began rebuilding the connection between them. Because unlike fake relationships built on performance, what they had was painfully honest now. 3 days later, Obinna made a decision. No more hiding. No more pretending. It was time to reclaim his life completely. That morning, he called an emergency board meeting at Okafor Group headquarters. News spread through Lagos business circles immediately. Executives panicked. Investors became confused. Because according to rumors, Obinna Okafor was still physically crippled and financially unstable. Yet suddenly, the billionaire CEO wanted a full board assembly. Inside the mansion, Amara overheard part of the phone conversation while arranging documents. You're returning to the company? She asked carefully after the call ended. Obinna nodded. It's time. She studied him quietly. Nervousness flickered through her eyes. You're revealing everything? Yes. Amara lowered her gaze briefly. That's going to shock many people. Obinna smiled faintly. Good. For the first time in months, confidence had returned to his voice. Not arrogant confidence, just strength. And strangely, seeing that version of him again stirred something inside Amara's chest. Because despite the lies, this was still the man who once helped a starving girl outside his company building. Still the man who comforted her during storms. Still the man she loved. The following morning, Lagos buzzed with rumors. Luxury cars filled the parking lot of Okafor Group headquarters while executives hurried nervously through the building. Inside the boardroom, tension suffocated the atmosphere. Directors whispered anxiously among themselves. Why would he suddenly call a meeting? Is the company being sold? I heard foreign investors are taking over. Tundbako sat quietly near the far end of the table, looking unusually uncomfortable. Even he no longer knew what to believe anymore. Then suddenly, the boardroom doors opened, and silence swallowed the room instantly. Because walking confidently into the room, without a wheelchair, without assistance, was Obinna. Gasps erupted immediately. One director nearly dropped his tablet. Another stood up completely in shock. What the hell? Impossible. Mr. Okafor? Obinna walked calmly toward the head seat of the table like a man returning to his throne after war. The room remained frozen. Then finally Tun spoke weakly. You can walk? Obinna sat down slowly. Yes. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed properly. The shock was overwhelming. After months of believing the billionaire was permanently crippled, seeing him walk felt unreal. One older director finally found his voice. We were told your spinal injury was permanent. Obinna folded his hands calmly. You were told many things. The atmosphere became painfully tense. Another executive frowned deeply. So the rumors about financial collapse. False. More silence. Then suddenly several people began speaking at once. You mean the company was never in danger? You let shareholders panic. Investors almost withdrew. Obinna's expression hardened immediately. And yet somehow the company survived. The room quieted again. His voice became colder now. Interesting how quickly some people prepared to replace me. Nobody answered that, because many of them had. Obinna looked around the room carefully. Months ago, these same people spoke about him with pity and uncertainty. Now fear had returned to their eyes again. And strangely, he no longer enjoyed that fear the way he once did. Because recent months had changed him deeply. I called this meeting for one reason, he continued calmly. I am resuming full leadership of Okafor Group immediately. Nobody argued. Nobody dared. Because suddenly the powerful billionaire they once knew had returned completely. News exploded across Lagos within hours. Billionaire CEO walks again. Obinna Okafor returns to company headquarters. Financial collapse rumors proven false. Social media erupted violently. Television stations replayed footage repeatedly. Business analysts scrambled to explain what happened. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, Amara watched everything quietly on television. The reporters sounded amazed. The billionaire appears healthier than expected. Stock prices are already rising. He remains CEO of Okafor Group. Amara stared silently at the screen. Part of her still struggled emotionally, because while the world celebrated, she remembered nights crying beside a man she thought was helpless. Still, another part of her felt proud, because despite everything, she knew the real Obinna better than anyone else now. Not the billionaire, the man underneath the wealth. And that man, she still loved deeply. That evening, Obinna returned home later than usual. The moment he entered the mansion, he found Amara standing near the balcony. The city lights reflected softly across her face. "You watched the news," he said quietly. She nodded once. "You caused chaos today." He smiled slightly. "Maybe." Amara turned toward him fully now. "You looked happy." Obinna hesitated briefly. "I felt free." The answer surprised her. "Free." "For months I hid from the world." He stepped closer slowly. "But today I stopped pretending." Silence settled gently between them. Then softly, Amara asked, "Do you regret it?" "The lie." She nodded. Obinna looked at her carefully. "Yes." The honesty in his voice touched her deeply. "If I could change one thing," he continued quietly, "I would have told you sooner." Amara lowered her eyes briefly. Then finally she asked, "Why me?" Obinna smiled faintly. "What do you mean?" "You're rich, powerful. You could have anyone." He stared at her for several seconds before answering. "Because everybody else loved what I owned." His voice softened. "You loved me when you believed I had nothing left." Emotion filled Amara's eyes immediately, and in that moment, the remaining anger inside her weakened further. Days passed. Then something beautiful slowly happened. The mansion began feeling alive again. Workers returned gradually after learning the company was stable. The kitchen became busy once more. Phones rang regularly. Meetings resumed. But this time, everything felt different. Obinna felt different. Before the accident, power controlled his life completely. Now he valued simpler things. Peace, honesty, love, and increasingly, those things existed only around Amara. One evening, they sat together on the rooftop balcony, watching Lagos nightlife below. Cool wind moved gently through the air while soft music played faintly from downstairs. Amara laughed quietly at something he said. And suddenly, Obinna realized something important. For months after the accident, he believed losing his legs would destroy his life. But instead, the accident revealed the truth about everyone around him. And somehow, through all the pain, it led him to her. "Amara." She looked up softly. "Yes." Obinna reached into his pocket slowly. Her eyes widened immediately when she saw the small velvet box. "Obinna." He knelt before her carefully. This time for real. No lies. No performance. No test. Only love. "I know I hurt you," he said quietly. "And I know rebuilding trust takes time." Amara's eyes filled with tears instantly. "But you changed my life in ways I can never explain." His voice shook slightly now. "You stayed beside me when everybody else disappeared. You loved me when you thought I was broken." He opened the ring box slowly. "Amara Daniels." The city lights glittered beautifully behind them. "Will you marry me?" Tears rolled freely down her cheeks now. For several seconds, she could not speak. Then finally she whispered, "Yes." Obinna smiled emotionally as he slipped the ring onto her finger. And as Lagos sparkled endlessly beneath the night sky, two people who met through pain, loneliness, and heartbreak quietly began a brand new future together. The internet never forgot scandal, especially not in Lagos. For weeks after Obinna Okafor returned publicly as healthy, wealthy, and still fully in control of Okafor Group, social media remained obsessed with the story. Blogs posted endless headlines. Billionaire CEO secretly faked financial collapse. Former fiancé abandons Obinna during hard times. Maid becomes billionaire's new fiancé. People argued endlessly online. Some criticized Obinna for deception. Others mocked Vanessa Cole mercilessly for abandoning him. But one thing remained constant in every version of the story. Amara stayed. Vanessa left. And for Vanessa, that truth became unbearable. 3 months after leaving the mansion, Vanessa's life looked very different. The luxury lifestyle she once enjoyed effortlessly had started disappearing slowly. The wealthy friends who constantly invited her to yacht parties and exclusive events became colder after the scandal spread online. Some secretly mocked her behind her back. Others openly avoided discussing Obinna around her entirely. Even worse, many people now viewed her as the woman who abandoned a crippled man for money. And Lagos society loved gossip too much to let that reputation disappear quietly. One afternoon, Vanessa sat inside an expensive cafe in Lekki scrolling furiously through comments online. She left when he became helpless. Amara deserved him more. Gold digger. Vanessa slammed her phone angrily onto the table. This is ridiculous. Her friend Cynthia Morgan sighed tiredly. You need to stop reading comments. How can I stop when everybody is insulting me? Cynthia stirred her drink carefully. Well, people think you abandoned him. Vanessa looked offended instantly. I did not abandon him. Cynthia raised an eyebrow slowly. Vanessa. He lied to me first. Silence followed briefly. Then Cynthia asked carefully, if he truly lost everything, would you have stayed? Vanessa opened her mouth immediately, then paused, because suddenly, she realized she did not know the answer herself. The hesitation alone made her angry. I'm tired of everybody acting like I'm evil, she snapped. Cynthia looked at her quietly. You did leave. Vanessa grabbed her handbag immediately. I knew coming here was a mistake. Then she stormed out angrily. But even outside the cafe, peace refused to follow her. Because everywhere she turned lately, people whispered. Meanwhile, life inside Obinna's mansion felt brighter than ever before. The house that once carried loneliness and emotional tension now overflowed with warmth again. Music returned. Laughter returned. Peace returned. And at the center of it all stood Amara. Amara Daniels still struggled adjusting to her new reality sometimes. Being engaged to one of the richest men in Nigeria felt unreal. Some mornings she woke up genuinely confused about how life changed so dramatically. 1 year earlier, she worried about feeding herself. Now she sat beside Obinna discussing wedding plans. Life truly changed unexpectedly. Still, despite the luxury surrounding her now, Amara remained humble. She still treated workers kindly, still cooked occasionally, still preferred simple things over flashy displays. And that made Obinna love her even more. One evening, they sat together in the living room reviewing wedding decoration options. Amara pointed toward one extravagant gold design and laughed. This one looks like a royal funeral. Obinna burst into laughter. You insult everything expensive. Because rich people enjoy unnecessary things. He smiled while pulling her closer gently. You know you're marrying one of those rich people. Amara smirked playfully. Yes, I'm still adjusting. The peaceful moment filled the room warmly. Then suddenly, Obinna's phone buzzed. The moment he saw the caller ID, his expression changed immediately. Vanessa. Amara noticed instantly. You can answer. Obinna hesitated briefly before declining the call. But seconds later, she called again and again. Amara looked at him carefully. You should probably hear what she wants. Obinna exhaled slowly before finally answering. What? Vanessa's voice exploded immediately through the phone. You humiliated me. Obinna closed his eyes briefly. Vanessa. No. You lied to everybody. You abandoned me. You manipulated me first. Amara quietly stood up to leave the room. But before she walked away, she heard Vanessa's next sentence loudly through the speaker. You replaced me with a maid. The insult froze the atmosphere instantly. Obina's expression darkened immediately. "Don't speak about her like that." Vanessa laughed bitterly. "Oh please. You expect me to watch quietly while my entire reputation gets destroyed. You destroyed your own reputation." Silence followed briefly. Then Vanessa's voice became colder. "You think this is over?" Obina frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "You'll see." Then she hung up. The tension inside the room remained heavy afterward. Amara avoided eye contact quietly. "I should go upstairs." "No." She paused. Obina stood and walked toward her carefully. "You have nothing to be ashamed of." Amara forced a faint smile. "I know." But the words, "just a maid," still lingered painfully in her mind. Because despite everything changing, part of her still feared she didn't fully belong in Obina's world. And Vanessa knew exactly where to attack. That same night, Vanessa sat alone inside her apartment replaying old photos on her phone. Pictures of vacations, luxury dinners, private jets, designer gifts, memories of the life she once believed would last forever. Tears filled her eyes angrily. She remembered the old Obina, powerful, confident, obsessed with her. Now another woman occupied that position beside him. And not just any woman. A maid. The humiliation burned deeply. Vanessa threw her phone across the couch furiously. How did this happen? But deep down, she already knew. Because when Obina appeared broken, she walked away, and someone else stayed. Simple, painful, true. Still, Vanessa's pride refused to accept defeat. Her entire social circle knew about the upcoming wedding now. People laughed behind her back constantly. Blogs referred to Amara as the loyal woman who won the billionaire's heart. Meanwhile, Vanessa became the villain of the story, and she hated it, desperately. Suddenly, her phone buzzed again. A gossip blog had posted engagement photos of Obina and Amara together. The caption read, "True love wins after betrayal." Vanessa stared at the smiling photo silently. Then rage slowly consumed her. "No." Her voice trembled. "No. She doesn't get to take my life." And in that moment, something dangerous formed inside her mind. Over the next few weeks, wedding preparations intensified. The mansion transformed beautifully. Designers arrived daily. Florists moved through the halls. Tailors delivered custom outfits. Even Obina's mother seemed happier than she had been in years. One afternoon, while supervising decorations, Mrs. Okafor pulled Amara aside gently. "My son smiles differently around you." Amara blushed shyly. "He talks more now," Mrs. Okafor continued warmly. "Before the accident, he was always emotionally distant." Tears filled Amara's eyes slightly. "He's been through a lot." "So have you." Mrs. Okafor held her hand softly. "But God brought both of you together for a reason." The emotional moment nearly made Amara cry. Because after everything, she finally felt accepted. Not as a maid, not as an outsider, but as family. Unfortunately, elsewhere in Lagos, Vanessa's bitterness continued growing. She began attending events again, desperately trying to repair her image. But the whispers followed everywhere. At one luxury party, she overheard two women gossiping nearby. "That's the one who left Obina. The maid replaced her." Vanessa immediately grabbed another glass of champagne angrily. Humiliation consumed her daily now, and eventually, the anger transformed into obsession. One evening, she sat alone staring at an online article about Obina's wedding scheduled in 2 weeks. Then slowly, a smile appeared on her face. Cold, calculated, dangerous. "If I can't stop this wedding," her eyes darkened, "I'll ruin it." And somewhere across Lagos, completely unaware of the storm approaching, Obina and Amara continued planning their future together peacefully, not realizing the past was preparing one final attack. The wedding day arrived wrapped in gold, white, and sunlight. From early morning, the luxurious event center overlooking the Lagos waterfront buzzed with activity as decorators rushed around making final adjustments. Fresh flowers covered nearly every corner of the massive venue. Crystal chandeliers glittered beautifully overhead, Soft live music floated through the atmosphere while guests arrived in expensive cars one after another. It was the society wedding of the year. Business moguls, politicians, celebrities, socialites. Everybody wanted to witness the marriage between Obinna Okafor and Amara Daniels, the billionaire and the former maid. The story fascinated people endlessly. Outside the venue, journalists gathered excitedly while cameras flashed non-stop. Today marks the highly anticipated wedding of billionaire businessman Obinna Okafor. Many people remain divided over the controversial love story, but supporters describe the relationship as proof that true love still exists. Inside the groom's preparation suite, Obinna adjusted his cufflinks slowly while staring at himself in the mirror. For a moment, he barely recognized the man looking back at him. Months ago, he sat alone in darkness believing his entire life was over. Now, today he was getting married. Not to the woman he originally planned for, but to the woman who stayed when everything collapsed. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." Tund Bako entered carefully wearing an expensive black suit. For a few seconds, neither man spoke. Their friendship had suffered during the months after the accident. Not completely broken, but changed, because Obinna now saw people differently, even old friends. Still, Tund had apologized sincerely weeks earlier for distancing himself during the difficult season. And slowly, their friendship had begun healing again. "You look nervous," Tund said finally. Obinna laughed quietly. "I survived a fake paralysis scandal and public humiliation, but somehow marriage is what scares me." Tund smiled faintly. "That's because this one matters." The words settled deeply. Yes, this one truly mattered. Because for the first time in his life, Obinna was marrying someone who loved him beyond wealth and status. Someone who saw the man beneath the billionaire image. Tund stepped closer and adjusted Obinna's collar slightly. "You're lucky, you know?" Obinna looked at him carefully. "I know." Meanwhile, upstairs inside the bridal suite, Amara sat before a large mirror while makeup artists carefully adjusted her veil. She looked breathtaking. The elegant white gown flowed beautifully around her, while tiny diamonds sparkled softly beneath the lights. Yet, despite how beautiful she looked, nervousness filled her chest. Her hands trembled slightly. "You okay?" one bridesmaid asked gently. Amara smiled faintly. "I think so, but honestly," she still struggled believing this was truly happening. Sometimes she remembered the frightened girl who arrived in Lagos years ago with nothing. Hungry, broken, lost. Now that same girl was about to become Mrs. Okafor. Life truly changed unexpectedly. Mrs. Okafor entered the room moments later smiling warmly. The moment she saw Amara fully dressed, emotion filled her eyes instantly. "Oh my goodness!" Amara stood shyly. Mrs. Okafor walked closer slowly before holding both her hands. "You look beautiful." "Thank you, Mama." That word still felt emotional every time Amara said it. Because after losing her own mother, Mrs. Okafor had slowly filled part of that emptiness. The older woman touched Amara's cheek gently. "My son is finally happy again." Tears gathered immediately in Amara's eyes. "I just want to love him well." Mrs. Okafor smiled softly. "You already do." Downstairs, guests filled the venue elegantly. Conversations buzzed excitedly while cameras flashed endlessly. Many people whispered about the unusual love story. "I still can't believe he chose the maid. She stayed when everybody left. That girl must have a good heart." Others sounded more judgmental. "She got lucky. Imagine becoming billionaire wife overnight." But regardless of opinions, everybody remained curious. At exactly 1 p.m., the ceremony finally began. The lights dimmed softly. Music floated beautifully through the hall. Guests turned toward the entrance as bridesmaids began walking gracefully down the aisle. Then finally, Amara appeared. The entire room seemed to pause. She looked radiant, elegant, graceful, peaceful. Obinna stared at her completely speechless. Emotion tightened inside his chest immediately, because suddenly, Every painful moment from the past year flashed through his mind. The accident, the loneliness, the betrayal, the nights he believed life was over. And somehow, all those painful roads led him here, to her. Amara's eyes met his as she walked slowly toward the altar. And instantly, everything else disappeared. The crowd, the cameras, the noise. Only the two of them remained. When she finally reached him, Obinna gently took her hand. "You're shaking," he whispered softly. "So are you." They both laughed quietly. The officiating minister smiled warmly before beginning the ceremony. "We are gathered here today." The atmosphere became emotional quickly. Guests smiled warmly. Some wiped tears quietly. For once, the story truly felt beautiful. But then, "Stop this wedding." The voice exploded across the hall sharply. Gasps erupted instantly. Everybody turned toward the entrance. And there she stood, Vanessa Cole, wearing a tight red dress with fury burning across her face. The music stopped immediately. Whispers spread through the hall rapidly. "Oh my God! She came! This is insane!" Vanessa walked aggressively down the aisle while security guards hesitated uncertainly. Obinna's expression hardened instantly. Amara's heart pounded nervously beside him. Vanessa stopped directly before them, breathing heavily. "You lied to everybody!" she shouted at Obinna. Cameras flashed wildly now. Journalists practically vibrated with excitement. The scandal just became bigger. Obinna remained calm. "Vanessa, this is not the place." "Oh really?" she snapped bitterly. "You humiliated me publicly for months." The guests watched intensely. Vanessa pointed angrily toward him. "You pretended to be crippled. You pretended to be broke. You manipulated everybody." Murmurs exploded throughout the venue. Some guests looked uncomfortable now. Others leaned forward eagerly for drama. Amara stood frozen beside Obinna, while Vanessa's voice echoed loudly through the hall. "You made me look like a monster." Obinna finally stepped forward calmly. "Yes," he said clearly. The hall became silent instantly. "Yes, I pretended." Vanessa laughed triumphantly. "You see? But not for the reasons you're pretending." The confidence in his voice shifted the atmosphere immediately. Obinna slowly turned toward the guests. And then he spoke loudly enough for the entire hall to hear. "The accident changed my life." Silence spread through the room. For the first time, I saw how quickly people disappear when power disappears. His eyes briefly found Vanessa again. People I trusted abandoned me. Friends distanced themselves. Business partners prepared to replace me. The atmosphere grew heavier. And the woman I planned to marry, his voice became colder slightly, walked away when she believed I had nothing left. Vanessa's face tightened instantly. "That's not fair." Obinna ignored her interruption. "She called me a broke cripple." Gasps spread softly among the guests. Vanessa looked around desperately now as judgment slowly turned toward her. Obinna continued calmly. "When she believed I was helpless, she left." Then gently he reached for Amara's hand. But this woman stayed. The room became quiet again. "Amara fed me with her own money. She cared for me when everybody else disappeared. She loved me believing I had lost everything." Emotion filled Amara's eyes immediately. Obinna looked at her softly. "She never stayed because of wealth. She stayed because of love." The atmosphere shifted completely now. Guests began murmuring sympathetically toward Amara. Meanwhile, Vanessa looked increasingly desperate. "You tricked me," she shouted again weakly. Obinna finally faced her directly. "No." His voice remained calm. "I revealed who you truly were." The words hit like thunder. Several guests nodded quietly. Others whispered openly now. "She left him. That's terrible. She only cared about money." Vanessa's breathing became uneven. "You all think you're better than me?" she snapped at the crowd. Nobody answered. Then somewhere near the back, someone booed. Another followed immediately. Soon murmurs of disapproval spread openly across the venue. Vanessa looked horrified. Humiliation flooded her face completely. The wealthy socialites she once considered friends now stared at her with judgment instead of admiration. Tears gathered angrily in her eyes. "You're all hypocrites." But this time, nobody defended her, because deep down, everyone understood the truth. She loved comfort more than loyalty, and now the entire city knew it. Vanessa glared at Obina one final time, then at Amara. For a brief second, pain flickered beneath all the anger. Not just pride, regret, real regret, because somewhere deep inside herself, Vanessa finally understood what she truly lost. Not the money, not the mansion, the man. Then suddenly she turned and ran toward the exit while cameras flashed wildly behind her. The giant doors slammed shut moments later, and silence filled the venue again. Heavy silence. Then slowly, Obina turned back toward Amara. Their eyes met. "You okay?" he whispered softly. Amara nodded emotionally. "Yes." The officiating minister cleared his throat awkwardly. "Well." A few guests laughed nervously. Then, unexpectedly, applause erupted. Loud, warm, supportive. Guests stood clapping emotionally while smiles spread across the hall again. The tension finally broke. And for the first time that day, peace returned to the wedding. Because despite the chaos, love remained standing. For several seconds after Vanessa Cole ran out of the wedding hall, silence lingered heavily across the venue. The giant doors still trembled slightly from how hard she slammed them shut. Guests exchanged awkward glances while whispers floated softly through the hall again. Some people looked shocked. Others embarrassed. A few secretly entertained. But gradually, the tension began fading. Because despite the dramatic interruption, one truth remained standing clearly before everybody. Amara Daniels stayed. Obina Okafor chose her. And their love survived everything. The officiating minister smiled gently while adjusting his glasses. "Well," he said awkwardly, causing a few guests to laugh softly, "I believe we still have a wedding to complete." That finally broke the remaining tension completely. Warm laughter spread across the hall. Music slowly resumed. Guests relaxed again. Obina turned toward Amara carefully. "You sure you're okay?" Amara nodded softly, though emotion still shimmered in her eyes. "I'm fine." Then quietly she added, "I just want to marry you already before another person enters dramatically." Obina laughed properly for the first time since Vanessa's interruption. The guests laughed too, and somehow, that small moment restored joy to the entire atmosphere again. The ceremony continued beautifully afterward. This time, nothing interrupted them. No lies and no fear and no pretending. Only truth. Only love. As the officiating minister began the vows again, Obina held Amara's hands gently inside his. Looking at her now, he still found it difficult believing how much his life had changed within 1 year. The accident nearly destroyed him, but somehow, the destruction cleared space for something real. "Do you, Obina Okafor?" the minister asked warmly, "take Amara Daniels to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Obina never looked away from her eyes. "I do." His answer came immediately, firmly, confidently. Emotion filled the hall softly. Then the minister turned toward Amara. "And do you, Amara Daniels, take Obina Okafor to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Tears gathered instantly in her eyes, because suddenly she remembered everything. Arriving in Lagos hungry and afraid, sleeping in cheap shelters, almost giving up on life entirely. Then one act of kindness changed everything. One wealthy stranger choosing compassion over indifference. And now, that same man stood before her offering forever. "I do," she whispered emotionally. The minister smiled warmly. "Then by the authority given to me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." The hall erupted instantly. Applause, cheers, celebration. And as Obina pulled Amara gently into his arms and kissed her beneath the golden lights, something beautiful settled inside both their hearts. Peace. The kind of peace money could never buy. The wedding reception became unforgettable. Music filled the massive hall while guests danced joyfully beneath sparkling chandeliers. Laughter echoed endlessly, Champagne flowed freely. Cameras flashed nonstop. Yet, despite all the luxury surrounding them, the happiest moments remained surprisingly simple, like watching Amara laugh during speeches, or seeing Mrs. Okafor wiping tears proudly while dancing with her son. Even Tun Bako looked genuinely emotional while giving his toast. "I've known Obinna for years," Tun said while holding his wine glass carefully. "And honestly, I thought I understood him." The room quieted. But the accident changed all of us. Obinna listened silently. It revealed things. Painful things. Tund glanced briefly toward Obinna before continuing. It showed us who we truly were when power disappeared. The atmosphere became emotional again. Then Tund smiled softly toward Amara. But thankfully, it also revealed someone extraordinary. Guests applauded warmly while Amara lowered her eyes shyly. Tund raised his glass. To real love, to loyalty, and to second chances. Everyone cheered loudly. Later that evening, after most guests moved toward the dance floor, Obinna and Amara slipped quietly onto the private balcony overlooking Lagos waters. Cool night wind moved gently around them while city lights glittered endlessly in the distance. For several minutes, neither spoke. They simply stood together peacefully. Finally, Amara exhaled softly. "What a crazy year." Obinna laughed quietly. "That's one way to describe it." She leaned lightly against the balcony railing. "You know something funny?" "What?" "If somebody told me 1 year ago I would marry a billionaire," she shook her head smiling, "I would think they were mentally unstable." Obinna grinned. "To be fair, marrying me after all this drama might still be mentally unstable." Amara laughed loudly. The sound warmed him deeply, because after everything, hearing her laugh still felt like healing. Then gradually, her smile softened. "You scared me back then." Obinna looked at her carefully. When the accident happened, emotion flickered in her eyes. "You looked so broken." He became quiet. "For a while I was." The city lights reflected softly across the water below them. Then Obinna spoke again quietly. "You know what the strangest part is?" "What?" "I used to think success meant having power." He looked toward her gently. "But now I think success is finding people who still love you when power disappears." Amara's eyes filled slightly with tears, because deep down, she understood exactly what he meant. Inside the hall, music and celebration continued loudly. But out on the balcony, the world felt quieter, more honest. Obinna gently held Amara's hand. "You changed me." She smiled softly. "You changed me too." "No," he corrected gently. "You saved me." The words settled emotionally between them, because they were true, not just physically, emotionally too. Before the accident, Obinna lived surrounded by fake loyalty and expensive distractions. But after losing what people valued most about him, he finally discovered what truly mattered. Not wealth, not status, not admiration. Love, real love, the kind that remains when everything else disappears. Hours later, after the final guests departed, the newly married couple finally returned home. Their mansion looked peaceful beneath the midnight sky. As they stepped inside together, Amara suddenly laughed softly. "What?" She looked around dramatically. "This house feels different now." Obinna smiled. "Because you're no longer staff?" Amara pointed playfully. "Exactly." They both laughed. Then quietly, Obinna pulled her closer. "No matter what changes," his voice softened deeply, "never doubt your place here again." Emotion filled her eyes instantly, because despite becoming his wife, part of her still sometimes feared waking up from the dream. Obinna touched her face gently. "This is your home now." And for the first time in her entire life, Amara truly believed she belonged somewhere. Later that night, rain began falling softly outside again. Just like the night everything changed. But this time the atmosphere felt different. Peaceful instead of tragic. Hopeful instead of lonely. Inside their bedroom, Obinna stood beside the window quietly watching Lagos lights shimmer through the rain. Amara walked toward him slowly before resting her head gently against his shoulder. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then finally, Obinna whispered softly, "You know, if the accident never happened." Amara looked up. "What? I might never have discovered who truly loved me." Tears gathered softly in her eyes. Then she smiled. "Maybe some painful things happened to lead us somewhere better." Obinna kissed her forehead gently. Maybe she was right, because despite all the betrayal, despite all the heartbreak, despite all the loneliness, love still found them. And standing there together while rain tapped softly against the windows, both of them finally understood something beautiful. True love is not proven when life is easy. It is proven when life becomes difficult, and someone still chooses to stay. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel.